Just before the epilogue to Night in the Woods, May delivers a heartfelt monologue to her closest friends via messenger. During this sequence, we see Bee in her house by herself, with her father, Mr. Santello, noticeably absent from his signature chair. In light of this, some fans have speculated that Mr. Santello is a cult member and is missing from this scene because he's actually trapped down in the mines with the rest of the murderous uncles. But does this theory hold up under scrutiny? Is there any other evidence for or against his status as a cult member? Let's take a look. First, let's review everything we know about Mr. Santello. He's the owner of the Old Pickaxe, a hardware store in town center. After Bee's mom died, Mr. Santello had a mental breakdown and fell into a depression that he has yet to rebound from. As a result, Bee has been forced to take over the business. She handles all the day-to-day affairs, running the store, making house calls, and managing the budget. Despite this, Mr. Santello maintains a firm grip on the business from afar. Bee can't fire anyone, forcing her to work with creeps like Creek, and Mr. Santello's name is still on all the checks and business documents. It's a situation that has put Bee in a bit of a stranglehold, as I'm sure there are changes she'd like to make to the store. She's an incredibly intelligent person, and I have no doubt that she'd have that place firing on all cylinders if she had full authority. But unfortunately for her, Mr. Santello holds all the cards. We know little else about Mr. Santello, other than that he likes football, is a big fan of the Smelters, and that he didn't always own the Old Pickaxe. It's easy to miss, but according to one of the newspaper articles in the library, it was originally opened by a man named Roy Burge. When examining Mr. Santello's background for a potential connection to the cult, a few things do stand out to me. First, he appears to be in his 40s or 50s, which puts him in the right age bracket to be a cult member. But it's hard to say whether or not he would have been personally affected by the shutdown of the mines and factories. If Roy Burge originally owned the Old Pickaxe, it's likely to assume that he passed it down to Mr. Santello after he retired. When small businesses like this change hands, especially without a rebrand, it's usually because the owner handed over the reins to someone he trusted, an apprentice of sorts. I'll bet that Mr. Santello has been working at the Old Pickaxe for far longer than he's owned it, maybe even since he was a teenager. Perhaps Roy Burge retired without anyone to pass the store down to, and instead gave it over to his most loyal employee, Mr. Santello. Thus, it's possible that Mr. Santello never worked in the factories or the mines, and didn't lose his job when they left Possum Springs, giving him no reason to go full murder cult. Then again, businesses pulling out of Possum Springs had to affect all working adults at that time, in some way, shape, or form. Even if the Old Pickaxe is still kicking, I'll bet they were doing better financially before everything shut down. Shifting gears, as evidenced by his dialogue, he speaks with a Yinzer accent, another common trait of cult members. We discussed this at length in my previous video, but it's one of their most defining characteristics. Now, with all that out of the way, let's examine the moment in question, the scene that's prompted all of this analysis in the first place, the pre-epilogue scene. As mentioned earlier, we see Bee looking into the living room where it seems that the TV is on and Mr. Santello is noticeably absent from the couch. From a story perspective, it is suspicious that he's not there. The hangout at Bee's apartment implies that he tends to fall asleep on the couch with the TV on most nights, and so does the layout of the apartment. This door here might lead to Mr. Santello's room, but it could be a bathroom. If it is a bathroom, then that would certainly be evidence pointing towards a connection between him and the cult, because that would imply that he is indeed missing and not just asleep in his own bedroom. But then again, we rarely see bathrooms depicted in interiors throughout the game. May's house doesn't have one, and neither does Greg and Angus's apartment. So I'm willing to bet that this door leads to Mr. Santello's bedroom. Perhaps, when Bee returned from the mines, she moved her father to his bed, and is stopping to watch whatever he had on TV during this scene. From a gameplay perspective, his absence is easy to explain. The focus of this pre-epilogue scene is on May's friends, and the impact they had on her throughout the game. So the developers might have decided to exclude him from this scene simply because he didn't need to be there. However, from a meta perspective, it remains puzzling. The Weird Autumn Edition functions as a kind of soft edit to Night in the Woods. There are several changes in dialogue, especially for the cult, and Aunt Molly and the city council, who were absent from the original epilogue, are back in the game. I have no doubt that this was done intentionally by the developers to remove suspicion that Aunt Molly and the city council were full-fledged cult members who died during the climax. If the developers did this for them, then why didn't they do the same for Mr. Santello? I doubt they were unaware of the fan theories about him, which had been circulating since the release of the game. Even if they didn't want to include him in the pre-epilogue scene, they could have covered for his absence with a line of dialogue. Something, anything mentioning that he's still around and not starving to death down in the mines. But they didn't do that, perhaps indicating that they wanted us to speculate that he's down with the murder cult. Conversely, many have raised the point that because B doesn't say anything about Mr. Santello being missing during her version of the epilogue, where she has an extended conversation with May, it's unlikely that he's a cult member. This is an excellent point, and indeed strong evidence against all the theories. But there may be a gameplay reason for this. The developers want to leave us in the dark about the cult. They want us speculating about potential members, questioning which of Possum Springs citizens might be among them. If B had revealed that her dad was missing in the epilogue, it would have gone against all of that. And in addition, it would have given the B epilogue a huge reveal. There's no way they could have added information like this into the Greg epilogue, so doing so would have vaulted her path over and above his in terms of narrative importance. This would also go against their design priorities, as they certainly don't want to make either of these paths the canon route, so to speak. Now, before I reach my own conclusions, there is one more piece of evidence I'd like to throw into the mix. While it is true that B doesn't say anything directly about her dad during the epilogue, she does tell May on Messenger that she isn't opening the old pickaxe that day. Is that a decision she's even allowed to make? Wouldn't she need Mr. Santello's approval to make that call? Or did she do so on her own, indicating that he is, in fact, missing in action? The split nature of their duties at the store makes all of this pretty ambiguous. It could be evidence for the cult column, or it could be evidence that we should all put our tinfoil hats away on this one. And overall, I think that really sums up the discussion about Mr. Santello and the cult. We have a fair amount of evidence pointing in both directions. Some things do indicate that he might be a cult member, while others tell us that he's just a middle-aged man going through an incredibly difficult time in his life. If you ask me, I think there's a distant possibility that he's a cult member. But I find it far more likely that he's absent from the pre-epilogue scene simply because he didn't need to be there. As a writer myself, when I put scenes together, I spend a lot of time thinking about the intended message of that particular moment, and whether or not characters need to be there at all. I suspect the developers wanted to focus on B in this shot, and not her father. If you're looking for a story explanation, I think it's most likely that B moved him to his bed when she got home. Though they do have their disagreements, she clearly cares for him a lot, so this is something that I fully believe she'd do, especially after making it out of a harrowing, life-altering experience down in the mines. But what about you? Do you think that B's dad is in the cult? Is there any evidence or counter-evidence that I missed? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Though I don't believe that Mr. Santello is a cult member, there are several other characters, many of whom go unseen, who I do have suspicions about. Characters like Creek, Dan McConnell, and Dr. Anderson. Next time we theorycraft about the cult, we'll be taking a look at all of them. My findings might surprise you. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon. Huge shout out to my Night in the Woods collaborators Wolf.Godwin and Jordi Jaen Moreno. Special thanks to users Monsieur Lefrog 8706 and Deshaun X776 for suggesting this topic. I was always going to do a video about B's dad and the cult at some point, but you guys really bumped this up on my schedule. So thanks again for commenting and joining in on the theory crafting with me. Next up, I'll be dropping my first video on The Witcher 3, followed by a video about my theory that Revenant Hill is likely a spiritual successor to Night in the Woods. See you guys then!